NightWatchman.
DJ LeRoy. It's Monday night, and we are back on Soul Lounge Primetime.
Yes, we are. So how was your week, buddy?
Week was great. You know, it was my birthday on Friday, and so...
Happy belated.
Yes, I celebrated. I'm over 30 now, officially, twice.
Definitely twice. We know that. So stop your lying.
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
okay?
Well, you were at my surprise 30th birthday party.
Yes, I was indeed.
Yes,
and so I do owe you a drink, all right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, NightWatchman, well, you know what I did this weekend. I was up in North Adams.
Yes. Young John Archer Harvey is making his debut on stage, huh?
Yes, indeed.
Yep.
The family is very, very proud.
Okay, and that's a tough room, you know.
Yes.
I mean, your family members would probably not coddle him if he was. Well,
you know how we roll. You know this.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So NightWatchman, we have a hell of a show.
Oh yeah, it's a great show. So we've been trying to continue to cover the legalization of cannabis in New York State.
So you think it's going to happen?
Oh, it's going to happen, but the question is not if and when, but how. And so one of the things that I noticed that in the forefront of the people who were advocating to make sure that we would get the type of legislation that we need, and I mean our community, I noticed that black women were in the forefront. And so we've had Yasmin Hurston from New York Minority Alliance on. Today, we've got a great lineup. We have Regina Smith from Harlem Business Alliance,
yes,
who also wrote a piece for The Root that I think is the best piece I've read on the issues concerning New York State and legalization.
Nice.
Thank you.
And she didn't pay me to say that. she was shocked to hear that.
Who else do we have here, NightWatch?
We have Leslie Stone from Let's Talk Cannabis.tv. She has been covering this space for a number of years.
Okay.
And we have Cheryl Green, the founder of the CannabisNessOfBeauty.com, talking about that segment that is opening up in terms of CBD-infused products for health and wellness and beauty.
So, NightWatchman, you didn't do this simply because it's Women's History Month now, did you?
I thought it was a good intersection to say this, but I've been thinking about putting this together since March. But you know, it's trying to get these types of folks on one stage. You can't just they busy. In fact, Yasmin Hurston was supposed to be here. She is on her way to Washington. So you know, we got the movers, the shakers, the policy makers. You know,
nice. Well, you know what?
We're gonna start with some music before we get into this.
I want to hear some opening lines.
You want to go
first.
right into it? So then I guess we have to. Regina, you are up first.
Okay, all right.
Welcome to Soul Lounge Primetime.
Welcome, Regina.
Oh, thank you, gents. I appreciate it. I love being here so that we can get this information out to the community.
So Harlem Business Alliance has really taken a leadership role in this. Tell me how it came to your focus that this was something you guys needed to kind of put a stake in the ground about.
So several years ago, Cassandra from the Drug Policy Alliance approached my daughter. You know, I have a grown daughter, and said that she was interested in partnering with HBA to have forums around cannabis and entrepreneurship. And so I was all for it. It took my board a little while to warm up to the idea.
Knowing your board, yes indeed.
You know, so it took a little while, and then we saw what was happening with Marvin Washington. You know, he was talking about coming to Harlem and having this big cannabis summit at the Schomburg, and we were like, okay, well, if you're doing it and we're trying to do something, maybe we could partner and do something together. But he decided to postpone his event, and we moved forward with ours because what we were seeing is that there were a lot of conversations and discussions around the city, and it was primarily non-black people who were having these conversations and these meetups and everything. And so we said, wait a minute, you know, we really need to have this conversation in the black community. We need to let our people know what's going on because we have been the most harmed by the war on drugs, the Rockefeller laws, you name it, for over 4 decades. And so so we had a meetup, and then after that went well. You know, we had it at our space, and then after that we had a large event at the National Black Theater. So, and we had, and what was really great about it is that we had a number of black people who are moving in that space, and they said that was the first time that they were in a space with black people who were interested in getting into the business, right? They weren't poo-pooing it. They weren't cursing them out. They were 100% about it, wanted to get the information and support the movement to legalization in a form and fashion that benefits black people. So it was a great event.
Nice.
What do you think the key issues are that we as a community need to know? And also, what do you think are some of the misconceptions around this?
So the key thing that we need to know is that we need to be in this space, right? There's no reason why white people should benefit from the legalization of marijuana when we're consumers. We've been consumers for a long time, but we've been incarcerated for minor crimes, okay? And so for that reason alone, we need to be involved in the benefits of legalization, and we need to be able to create these businesses and grow them and turn around and hire our people, because as we well know, we hire our people more than any other types of corporations. So white corporations, they might hire, 2 whatever percent. The tech companies with all of these diversity conferences year after year after year after year, still, like 2% or whatever. It's shameful.
Right.
And they're really not going to change those numbers. And they're talking about, we're making progress and whatnot around diversity, but that's bringing in white women. Okay,
Right,
so that's
right.
what they call diversity, but black people still aren't.
Or Asians.
Yeah,
they count Asians as diversity, but they're bringing them in on the visas, and they're not really concerned about us.
Not at all.
Not at zero concern about us. And so they just talking, they keep talking that talk and whatnot, but the results are we're not in that space. So if we want to really be about empowering our communities, we have to create more black-owned businesses, because we will turn around and we will hire our people. So that's critical. And if that doesn't happen, then we're going to continue to have this huge wealth gap. I read a study that my daughter sent to me the other day. It's a little dated, 2017, but basically it says by the year 2053, our net worth will be $0. Okay, so right now, it's
Right, if we continue on these current trends.
Right.
And so I think the biggest takeaway here is here's a chance to disrupt the trend line.
Yes.
Because this is an area that's growing. It's an area that already has huge consumption, but now we're talking about an opening up of a number of different sub-businesses and genres and segments. So Leslie, I want to bring you into the conversation because you've been covering the space for a few years now. Tell us a little bit about when you started looking at the space and to where it's come from now.
Well, it's been a rapid evolution in the space. I've been on the West Coast for the last 2.5 years, so I actually seen the transformation from the West Coast going from medicinal into the adult use space, and then being here back on the East Coast and watching how it's quickly emerging here. It's just created a lot of noise, and a lot of people don't understand what they're hearing. The biggest thing we must do, first and foremost, is to educate everyone. The education is the most fundamental part to creating successful businesses and creating these entities. One of the biggest problems with the marijuana legalization is just the whole misinformed and being miseducated by reefer madness.
Absolutely.
So until we can remove that stigma, and one of the missions I have taken upon myself was to create a show that helped to destigmatize the industry by speaking to the thought leaders and going out to the West Coast and learning how it was done as a profession, learning it from seed to sale. And there's a lot of different sectors to this business. There's a lot of different opportunities in this business. But people must understand that it's not just a business. It's also a medicine. And I believe what has happened with our society being capitalism, that we've kind of taken off with the green rush and everybody's looking at the dollars instead of really looking at the true benefit of the medicine. And if we look at the medicine, then we have to understand that there's a lot of people that are disadvantaged because those are the people that are low income and those are the people that have been impacted the most by war on drugs. So that's the thing that we must actually address. That's the gap. Currently, there's only 5% minorities in the business. It's legal in 33 states medicinally right
And
now.
only 5%. Wow.
And as you can see, Harlem being the capital of African American or black people, the Harlem Renaissance, for Harlem to just now kind of get wind of it says a lot about how far behind we are.
Absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned in terms of the medicinal benefits of the drug, that's one of the things that's just so disheartening, and how understudied the cannabis has been because of it being a, what is that, Schedule 1?
Control 1.
Control 1 narcotic that researchers have been actually prevented from actually studying the benefits of it. And we know that it has enormous benefits that we've only touched the surface of.
And remember, the plant, it not only has medicinal benefits, it also has industrial benefits. So just, we talked about education. So let's take a moment to just clear a few things up. So the cannabis plant, yes, it's known as the weed reefer that people smoke and get high. But it's also the hemp plant that has many industrial uses. One of those uses, by the way back when, Henry Ford was actually looking into making a hemp-powered automobile. And so there were a lot of industries that did not want to see industrial hemp, the oil industry being one of them, pharmaceuticals being another. So making the cannabis plant a Schedule 1 controlled narcotic was a political and a business move. And so now we're at this point where we're trying to, the medicinal benefits have forced us back here. But to make sense of this legal, where we are, because first thing we got to understand is part of this plan is legal already. So the farm bill that passed in December legalized hemp as a plant, and it took it out of that whole Schedule 1 range.
Well, hemp was never classified as a Schedule 1. Cannabis is marijuana. So one of the first things people need to understand that there's a distinction in the two plants.
Yeah.
Cannabis, just so everyone can understand what cannabis is actually the plant that has THC in it.
Correct.
So hemp, which is the sister plant to cannabis, does not have THC. Right. You must genetically modify cannabis and take the THC out of it. So that's why hemp is what's legal throughout all 50 states, because hemp does not have THC in it at all.
Right, but we should understand they're not two different plants. They're different strains of the same plant.
Well, it's
yes. So one strain has THC, means it's either it's legal or it's not. A certain amount of THC means it's legal. You can get arrested. You can go to jail. Underneath that, do whatever you want.
And that amount is 0.3%.
Correct.
So long as it's 0.3%, that's what New York State has legalized for cannabis usage. You are eligible to utilize any marijuana product that has been classified and regulated in the state of New York.
Right. So
as a patient.
What I've seen is that there are black businesses that are already in motion in terms of farming basically THC-less cannabis. And you can call it hemp or you can call it CBD oil, but this is the product right now that is getting a lot of attention. It's revolutionizing a lot of businesses. Cheryl, you started to notice what was happening in the beauty industry in terms of CBD. So tell us a little bit about your focus and what those numbers look like and what people are seeing in that industry.
Well, what's happening, first of all, you have to realize THC is what gets you high. CBD does not. And all of these products have CBD oil in them. That the ones who are saying, that we are infused with, cannabis or CBD oil. What I'm noticing is that it's starting to become really huge in the general market. People are really becoming aware of it, and companies like, well, I don't want to promote any particular brands, but some of the larger cosmetics companies are jumping on the bandwagon, and there are a lot of smaller companies, mostly in the West Coast and in Canada, where they're doing these beauty products, and it seems to be unregulated. So the amount of CBD oil in these products is kind of questionable. A lot of people, they're just trying them. Some people have, they say it's great. Some, depending on the product, it's per product and where they're getting their supply from, and, the reputable farms and growers. So I noticed that people are investing now more in cannabis, and Canada has the largest the largest system, I should say, in the world. Even there are companies in the Netherlands that are dealing with farmers in Canada, and the business is just becoming. It's slow. It's growing slowly, I think, because in the West Coast things have been going on fine, and there have been a lot of private sales, but here in the East Coast, they're really, I don't know what the laws are, so I think, people, like, they're not really distributing out here. And I was looking at an article recently where it was a business blog, and there was this one man was saying that it would be interesting to see the distribution of beauty products like they would distribute like in a supermarket. Get a supermarket to use their business model to distribute the beauty products, because right now there's a lot of online sales because of the laws, but there aren't many places where you can actually go and buy high quality CBD infused products. Now, the benefit is that it's definitely an anti-inflammatory, and it has pain relieving qualities topically. So I was talking to a friend of mine who works at the Hospital of Special Surgery, and she was saying that just recently they were talking about the benefits of CBD oil, and so it's being talked about seriously.
Oh, absolutely. One of the guests we had on the show, Dr. Stephen Robinson, who is with the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, and has obviously spent a great deal of his time and effort studying the effects of cannabis from medical standpoint. So one of the things we learned from him is that, first of all, there are hundreds of cannabinoids. In fact, we have a system in our bodies called the endocannabinoid system. And so it kind of makes sense that cannabinoids are probably good for that system. So,
Yes.
So we talk a lot about the two, which is THC and CBD, are only two out of hundreds of these cannabinoids that can have potentially positive health benefits.
Absolutely.
The problem is they're only right now testing for maybe about 15 or 20 of them.
Right.
Yes.
And so basically what it means is that we are just scratching the surfaces of
Yes.
understanding what can be done in terms of health and wellness.
Right.
The problem I see is, can we keep it out of the hands of the FDA and these these agencies that have become basically marketing arms for the pharmaceuticals? Because the pharmaceuticals certainly would like to come in and jump in and take over this because they see it as a threat to what they're doing. And at the same point in time, we need a way to have health outcomes that are inexpensive. And this is something that you can grow.
Yeah. You know what? I'm also saying, because something that you touched on, Leslie, earlier. I had attended a forum hosted by the Harlem Business Alliance, and a number of the experts were talking about our community, talking about the black and brown communities. And one of the and NightWatchman, you actually witnessed it this evening in terms of the misconceptions about the plant.
That's true.
And one of the people said that probably one of the serious well, I'll say communities that needs to be educators is the faith community.
Yes.
Because them suckers
Yes.
come hard
Yes.
against it, thinking that it's going to be turning all of the people who now, once it's legal, into nodders and dope fiends and
they're
reefer
not-
madness.
Well,
They're not
opposi-
understanding.
Yes, the opposition that we are facing most really comes from religious leaders. Okay, that's where we get the most opposition, and also from your big farmers, your Fortune 500 companies, tobacco, alcohol, and farmer.
Right.
Those are
And
the
law enforcement.
Well, that's where the
Because
opposition
all
lies
these
right
are
now.
industries that get disrupted.
Well,
Right.
exactly, and this is the economy. Those are the industries that create our sector. That's the
Right.
GDP.
Right.
So if we start to, and they already see how disruptive the word they're using for cannabis legalization
Right.
is disruptive to those industries, and the disruption is that it's taking money away.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It's
That's the
ne-
big thing.
Well, I just read an article where they're going to start infusing CBD into beer and liquor.
Yes.
So they're getting in on it too. They're
Right.
doing a deal with Anheuser-Busch, and I believe
Molson in Canada. Is
yeah.
The deal has been
Coors.
done.
Coors, yes.
The deal
Wow.
has been done. See, this is one of the things that's happening that we're kind of behind the time on right now.
Always.
Once again,
Yes.
the Fortune 500 companies, they knew and saw this opportunity. So did the government. The government suppressed this from us. It wasn't done accidentally. It was done intentionally. Okay? So once they legalized it, they knew before we did that they were going to legalize it. So they put into place monopolies. And that's why they've created these verticals that's here in New York State. So the corporations already monopolize the industry. We're trying to disrupt that with
John
creating
Boehner is a-
legislation.
And play catch up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We all know John Boehner he's invested in a cannabis
Who would
farm,
have
I
thunk it?
believe.
Yes.
Who would have thunk it?
Well, listen. If
Acreage.
one thing you can tell you, if
So is Martha Stewart.
if you've been in the Congress, you know where the money is.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Night Watchman.
Well, so some of the talking points that we've gotten from, thank you, HBA, protected communities, making sure. So that goes back to there's a conversation that's been going on about the 7 neighborhoods, which is 7 neighborhoods that basically have supported the prison industrial complex here in New York, and so those are the 7 neighborhoods that have been most greatly impacted, and those 7 neighborhoods need to be compensated. And so I think that's kind of one of the number one things that advocates are talking about, and it's good to see that it's being addressed in a vague way, but we want to see what the specifics are. And expungement. You want to talk a little bit, Regina, about expungement?
Well, yes. I mean, what we're saying is that anybody who was arrested, incarcerated, have a record, that their record should be automatically expunged, that there should not be a process where they need to go to a forum and sit down with the district attorney's office and fill out papers and all that. That's some crap. Okay, so we're saying straight up automatic expungement. We're also saying that anybody who has been convicted of a crime related to nonviolent crime, related to marijuana or any other nonviolent crime, should be able to participate to be in this industry, to be able to not only work, but more importantly, to secure licenses and create and own businesses. So they shouldn't be prohibited. And so we feel that that's critically important. But I wanted to jump back to protected communities for a moment because, yes, these 7 neighborhoods, at least within the city, were the communities that were most impacted. And these were Black communities primarily, through and through. So, but there are also upstate communities, Westchester, Long Island, Buffalo, Syracuse. So there are other communities
absolutely.
where Black
Poughkeepsie,
bodies,
yep.
young
Bacon,
Black boys were targeted through our inferior school system. And you heard the quote where they could project how many prison cells they needed by the reading scores of our third grade boys. Okay?
Right.
So
Instead of just investing the money into teaching them how to read.
Well,
Right.
no, yeah. Well, they weren't interested in
Right,
that. I mean, they were
exactly.
fodder to create and to support economies in upstate New York, right?
Right, mhm.
So
right.
you even read maybe recently about a couple of weeks ago, the governor said that he wanted to close like maybe 3 prisons or something like that upstate, and one of the assemblywomen up there stated, "Oh no, I mean, these prisons are the foundation, the economic foundation of my communities, and I will fight that tooth and nail."
Whoa.
So they don't care how and who. All they are concerned about is making certain that that money comes to those
Per head.
communities, that their people are employed, to as prison guards,
keeps that
and
town
to,
alive.
to basically to
Yeah.
brutalize black men and black boys and black women, to brutalize them, and then on top of that, we turn around and pay their pensions. So I mean, it's just absolutely, it's diabolical. I mean, that's the best way to describe it, because when you look at city, state, and federal policies, they have all conspired to put us in the circumstances that we're in now.
A lot of people forget that, remember this guy, Freeway Ricky Ross, in L.A., and when he was finally, when it finally came out, when he was convicted, it was because the person he was buying the drugs for was the government informant. So when you see that the industries are literally set up vertically, it's like, okay, we're going to have a few guys who are going to win for a few years, and then we're going to take them down. And meanwhile, the crack business in L.A. funded the Reagan drug wars in South America.
Yes.
That's right.
So we haven't forgotten.
No.
And we're not going to forget. They're trying to make us forget, but this is now an opportunity for us to vertically integrate the business ourselves, not have vertical companies come in from California and Colorado and purport to help us with our medical cannabis by not putting one dispensary in any of our communities. And then when it goes recreational, we can't expect any more than what we got on the medical.
I looked at a map I was looking for dispensaries, and the map, lots of red dots on the West Coast. There's nothing on the East Coast.
Well,
Nothing.
there are, so
This
for
is nothing.
the 10 companies that opened
No
up in
farms,
New York,
nothing.
I believe they opened up one in the Bronx. The Bronx
Yes.
has 3 million people. There's none in Harlem. There's none in
As of yet.
Brooklyn.
As of yet. As of yet. Well,
And still
do you
not
know
one of
you
black
know
and
something
brown
that we
owned?
don't?
Well, I mean, it's going to happen. We know it's coming. I mean, we are the biggest consumers.
Okay,
so,
but my point, though, is that they have shown their hand with the medical implementation they gave us, because it was supposed to be about medicine, and yet you have a company coming in like MedMen who set up a dispensary across from Lord and
Fifth
Taylor,
Avenue.
and they've got Spike Jonze making movie commercials, and it's obviously targeted at a different audience, and we're not in it. So we have to hold them accountable for the medical system first and say, look, you already showed us that that's not working for us. So you need to be engaged in a dialogue where we can create our own outcomes from this with medicine, and not have to. We should not have to wait around for a company in California to decide that it's profitable to open up a store in Harlem. We need to be able to do our own co-ops with the allocations for personal growth, and create the infrastructure and the skill set within our own communities to cultivate, to extract, to test, to deliver,
Distribution is huge.
and to make products, and to use our own abilities to market.
Now, let's not be confused about the huge mega $1 million cannabis companies' interest in coming into communities like Harlem. They're definitely interested in coming
Sure.
into
Yes.
For
Harlem.
recreational. Yeah, absolutely.
And they'll do medical first and whatnot. I mean, because the idea is that, when we go adult use, they're there. So, and I even had a conversation with one of them, and I was told by one of the co-founders, we would love to open up a dispensary in Harlem. So we know what that's about. And I was like, well, wait a minute, with the Harlem Business Alliance. No, we would love to open up a dispensary in our community, okay? So, no, they're interested, but the way that the regs were written here in New York State for these companies to become registered organizations, they call them ROs, it was done in such a form that it created, it required millions of dollars. They were only given a few licenses to begin
10.
with, right?
Five
per
to
year.
begin
Right.
with.
So they could only open up in certain locations and whatnot. So, I mean, and so the state wanted to see how it was going to unfold before they decided to give them a lot more licenses to open up more dispensaries around the entire state. So they are waiting because they have made that mega $1 million
But the
investment.
And I understand
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
From a business standpoint, I understand they put a lot of capital in this. They were not expecting recreational to come this quickly. So all their models are off because they haven't.
Oh, yes, they were. They were pushing for it to happen this year.
Yeah, well,
They
were-
pushing real hard. They lobbying. They throwing thousands of dollars, I mean, at lobbyists to go and get this done.
But what they're not lobbying for is opening it up for small growers, for opening it up for personal
No,
growing
no.
licenses.
It's
Right.
big business.
No.
It's
That's
big
right.
business
It's a huge
now.
business.
So I
Right.
think what we have to understand is that it is big business. What I want our community to really take wind of is that this is not something that we should work in. It's just something we should own.
Oh, absolutely.
We should have ownership.
Absolutely.
So it's a different mindset. And once again, we're kind of at the last end of the race
We're
right now. We're
behind.
passing the
Always.
bills into
Yeah.
legislation. This is going to happen over the next 45 days, Regina, I believe, by April.
it's-
However,
Yeah.
it's not looking favorable at this time. I don't believe it's going to take place. But the thing is, our community is just finding out. So now, what does that leave us to do? We have to move fast.
Yes.
We have to position ourselves well. We have to create strategic partnerships. Because what they've done currently in New York is they created what's called a vertical. So the one license holder holds the whole vertical from
Right.
seed to sale, which is cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing.
So it's a monopoly.
Okay, so
And
they
retail.
monopolize the market currently. Then that's what's existing, and that's what we're fighting for in legislation to open up so that other people like ourselves can really participate. Because currently, right now, it takes, like Gina said, millions of dollars. The application process in New York State is $250,000. $50,000 of it is non-refundable.
Wow.
There was over, I think they said 50,000 applications. 5 people were selected. In the last couple of years, only 10 people have been selected, and hundreds of thousands of applications have been applied for. Now, see, we need to start asking questions, such as, where is this $50,000 going? The application fee.
Good question.
Actually, what we're okay. So let's go back to the legislation because you're absolutely correct. So Como jumped out with his announcement in December. I believe that he was trying to beat New Jersey to the punch because New Jersey had
Yes.
planned to legalize by the end of the year, right? So Como jumped into it. I mean, we can't have New Jersey legalized, and it's not legal here in New York. I mean, it's too close, right? So looking at the legislation that the governor's office put together, there were some huge gaps.
Yes.
And so we just found that it was critically important for us to come up with our position, right? And so one of the things that we feel very strongly about, in addition to the fact that the communities most harmed are the ones that should receive sole priority. Just people who have been harmed, who have come from those communities who have been harmed, should receive priorities. Other people will be able to get in and benefit because they have access to capital, right?
Right.
They don't need any special priorities, and they don't need any extra, funding or anything. We're the ones, but there is a process of defining who the equity applicants are. So again, those equity applicants should come from those communities. But we're also saying that on day one, there should be funding in the budget for the work that needs to be done by equity applicants to open businesses within our communities. And we're saying that our communities should be protected, which means we should have exclusive rights to open up these businesses in our community for a period of time. So Harlem, Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, Buffalo, we will not have major cannabis companies coming into those areas and setting up shop, okay? And so we feel that that's a critical element. We also believe that there have got to be incubators, so community-based organizations that have been working, as opposed to, the state or the city, government. They're good to a certain point, but we're talking about community-based organizations that have been doing the hard work and know how we need to work with our people to get them where they need to go. Plus the fact that we know the people who are doing this work now anyway, right? So, we have the relationships. We know them. They are our neighbors, right? So we have to work with them to help them transition from that side to this side so that they can meet the requirements, that they can open up these businesses and, as I said earlier, turn around and hire our people. So we can't have MWBEs where you have white women and Asians and other people coming in.
Everybody but us.
People who never served a day.
Regina,
Okay.
I know your disdain for that code language, but
But
we can't have that. We cannot go for that okie doke this time.
Well, this is definitely a time for plain talk. And we've seen how things start out with good intentions, and then the good intentions get subverted with, fine print language. And that's how the game goes. You have enough lobbyists, you put enough people in the right places, and something with the best of intentions gets subverted. And so this is a time where we need to speak loudly, clearly, and plainly about what it is we want to achieve, and be about having a blueprint and a strategy. And I think this is something we can have. The resources are there. We have the resources within our community to actually do this business. What we have not had is access to the capital. But what we do have,
or information.
Well, we have the information is in pockets. What we're doing right now with shows like this and with the events that have been putting on is that we're catching up. We're sharing the information.
Yes.
And this thing is big enough that there is a place for people along the spectrum. Everybody is not geared to set up a company, but you might have a skill in growing. You might have a skill in extracting. You might have a skill in testing. You might be good with security. You might be good with food and beverage.
That's right.
Or coming up, that we have many people who come up with different beauty creams and wellness products. And you might have just the scientific acumen to actually get down into the actual genetics.
You can do homemade salves and butters for that are anti-inflammatory, that are good for your skin. Your skin actually has receptors that make it very favorable to accept a cannabinoid product. I don't see why people can't make their own medicine in some cases.
So I think,
as well as beauty products.
So some of it is about changing the language, changing the conversation. Certainly getting over the misconceptions of
CBD does not get you high.
Right, exactly. This is not about ganja smoking. It's not about reefer madness. It's not about any of those media-driven images.
It's not about getting high. It's about getting well.
It's about health.
And it's about the fact that cannabis has been used for health purposes for thousands of years. And we learned this from a doctor, a medical doctor. Okay.
Well, see, I think that's what we all need to know. We have to learn the history of the plant.
Right.
So,
exactly.
and because
how it's being used.
Exactly, but because
and
they have
created
this reefer madness, and they misinformed us, so most of us have implanted in our minds this whole misconception of what the plant does. So now it's about teaching the power of the plant.
Exactly.
People don't understand the power of the plant. I wrote a paper in college, which was my first eye-opener. And it was so interesting during that time because nobody was talking about cannabis. So I became disruptive in college because I wrote this paper, a 25-page paper, that it was about marijuana, a drug or medicine. And it was at that time I realized, because I've researched and I was looking into the American medical journals. This was in the 2000s, and this was dating back in 1970s that this was discovered.
I saw that.
It was discovered in 1970s. It's documented in the Medical Journal right now.
Yes.
That marijuana was a medicine that alleviated pain for AIDS, wasting syndrome, glaucoma.
Renal. There was a woman who had renal failure, and she started taking it.
But this was documented almost 50 years ago.
Right.
We're
It's
talking
fine
about
now.
being
Then who
documented
knew?
Okay,
already.
but
It was already
if
documented.
we go back 100 years, cannabis was
Bible.
routinely used
Yes.
for medical purposes, even here in this country and in Europe.
Yes.
What happened around the beginning of the 20th century is that the medical colleges were funded by the Rockefellers and the Mellons, and they funded pharmacological,
pharma.
chemical-based medicine. When they started their funding, there were 2,200 homeopathic and naturopathic medical colleges. When they finished their funding, there were 6. So the whole idea of plant-based medicine and natural healing got diverted into this train wreck of a medical system that we have now, where you have these pharmacological solutions that don't actually heal you, but will keep you in a state of illness and continuing to use
the
their
drug.
their
Right.
product.
So, Night Watchman, I think we'll take a little
Take a little break for.
and then we'll come back and continue this and actually get some, I guess, some good thoughts in terms of, knowing this impending legislation is going to happen, how we can best prepare. for it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I want to talk about stress.
Lay down, baby. Please don't say a word. Dry your tears. I guess by now you've heard that I'm leaving again. One more day, and I'll be in the sky, so far away from the life of you and I. The place I can't pretend to forget about the times that you said that if you never take the time to breathe in and look inside you, if you're lost, I'll try to find you and remind you of the way that you feel when this all ends someday. And maybe now you'll understand that God is laughing at your plans. What will be, will be. Why don't you come inside, my friend, out of the rain, and maybe then you'll see what I see.
He plays until the sun goes down and falls asleep to the sound of a song that he says reminds him of you. And when he smiles, they say that he looks just like you, just walking around like the world is a stage, 'cause that's all a young man can do when his heroes not around. 'Cause if you never take the time to breathe in and look inside you, if you're lost, I'll try to find you and remind you of the way that you feel when this all ends someday. And maybe now you'll understand that God is laughing at your plans. What will be, will be. Why don't you come inside, my friend, out of the rain, and maybe then you'll see what I see. See what I see.
What I see,
See what I see. What I see. What I see.
DJ LeRoy, the music is still good on this show, I see.
And you know that of course, being foreign exchange. So shout out to DJ Propaganda for turning his old man into understanding what the young people are listening to.
You're not older, bro. You're better. You're better. So we got a surprise call from Dr. Stephen Robinson.
Is he listening now?
I am.
All right.
Greetings to you all. I'm sorry I can't be there in person.
We are too, my brother.
Through the magic of technology, you are.
Yes. So you did hear some of the comments, Doctor. So please weigh in.
No, I did. I think we know that this is at the beginning of a fundamental and major industry in this country, and I think we should do everything we can to make sure that we can take our rightful place and participate in all avenues of this industry, from the medical to the recreational to the distribution to the agricultural to the industrial, all of it.
And understand that there are just so many benefits to this plant. Now, that's not saying that it can't be abused. Anything can be abused. If you can go and find any product on the supermarket shelf, and if you eat enough of it or drink enough of it, you're going to have an adverse reaction. But cannabis certainly hasn't killed as many people as alcohol, hasn't killed as many people as tobacco, and it hasn't killed as many people as pharmaceuticals. Not even in the same conversation.
Well, if you look at the actual published data in the medical journals, they have documented that in those states that have medicinal cannabis laws on the books, there's been a 25% reduction in deaths due to opiate overdoses.
Bingo. There it is.
Wow.
Okay? So people have found, and scientifically they've found, that in terms of pain relief, which is why most people take opiates, cannabinoids have potentiated the analgesic effect of opiates so that patients are able to use a much lower dose of opiates to get the same analgesic benefit, and it doesn't push them close to the dose that will create the overdose and death.
Wow.
So doctor, I heard Leslie, as you heard, mentioned, and this is something we've been talking about for a while, education. Where do you see this actually coming to our communities and lowering their opposition to the introduction of cannabis?
Well, I saw a film with Malcolm X, and he was talking about how propaganda shapes people's ideas. He said, in World War II, the Chinese and the Russians were our allies, and the Germans and Japanese were our enemies. Then after World War II, the Chinese and Russians became our enemies, and the Germans and Japanese were our allies.
Yes.
Now, if you think about the kind of propaganda that was promulgated in the early 20th century, with Harry Anslinger and the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and Reefer Madness, to turn people against cannabis, when in fact it was listed in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia up until 1940.
That's right.
And as I mentioned in my talk at the Harlem State Office Building, it was in a lot of patent medicines manufactured by the foremost pharmaceutical companies in the United States up until 1930.
Wow.
Dr. Robertson,
So-
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Robertson, could you tell our listeners about the prescription drug called Marinol that actually contains synthetic THC that's prescribed by the pharmaceutical drug market? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, it was when people found out in the 1980s that cannabis was effective in reducing the nausea induced by chemotherapeutic drugs, cancer-fighting drugs, and also helped to promote the appetite in patients who had wasting syndromes, either from cancer or HIV/AIDS. The drug companies manufactured a single compound called THC, tetrahydrocannabinol.
Delta 9.
Yeah. Now that was discovered. The structure of it was discovered and elucidated by an Israeli biochemist, Raphael Meshulam, back in the 60s. The drug companies manufactured it as Marinol in the, I don't know, I guess it's the 1970s or 80s. Now, what they found is that they were trying to use that single compound to do everything that the whole plant does. And yes, it was effective in reducing the nausea induced by anti-cancer drugs, but patients often found that the psychoactive effects of Marinol were unacceptable. And because the whole plant itself has a combination of cannabinoids, particularly THC and CBD, and what we found is that CBD, cannabidiol, actually moderates and modifies the psychoactivity of THC, which means that people using the whole plant or smoking a joint or eating a brownie found that it was far more acceptable than the unopposed psychoactivity of THC, and they got the same benefit.
Okay.
So we are probably got to get in starting the wrap-up stages. But first of all, I want to thank Dr. Robinson for calling in. He's been a guest with us on several times, and I suspect he'll be a guest several times more, straight until when we have the rap party for the legislation.
That's right.
I'm anticipating we get a positive response.
No doubt.
Yes.
And I want to give a little shout out to Glenn Gilliam, who's listening to the show. And Glenn, if you're listening, also you need to have Dr. Robinson on as well. But you definitely want Regina, Leslie, and Cheryl on the show. And I guess you guys are going to continue this conversation before legislation is in effect, as they say.
Yeah. Right. Also, shout out to Yasmin Hurston, who couldn't make it.
Yeah.
Shout out to Cassandra Frederique.
Yes.
And just shout out
Mary
to
Pryor.
Yeah, Mary Pryor. There are just a lot of people who are out there just putting out good information, working this thing, and helping get the word out. And we're trying to do our little thing here on our spot. We're blessed to have our little First Amendment platform where we can have conversations that are not filtered and bring in guests that have some very, very significant points of view.
So going around, ladies, some parting words, and if someone wants to actually get in touch with you, how do they do that? Cheryl.
Okay, well, I have my website. It's the Cannabis of Beauty. And it's spelled cannabis-ness of beauty. And I'm on Twitter, Facebook, oh my God, Twitter, Facebook, everything.
Instagram,
all of it.
Gotcha.
It's a very new company.
Okay.
So, but it's a compilation of all things cannabis and beauty, and also investing. There's information on investing in cannabis and information about certain farms, nationally and internationally, as well as, I'm not really pushing products, but there will be some products mentioned just because it's information.
Okay,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Leslie.
You can go to my website. It's www.letstalkcannabis, and that's CANNABIZ.TV. You can also check my show out that airs bi-weekly every other Saturday from 11 to 11:30 a.m. The name of the show is Let's Talk Cannabis. It airs on Spectrum, Files, and RCN. In addition to that, you can follow me on social media at Let's Talk Cannabis.
Very nice.
Regina, you have the last word.
Okay, so we're having another meetup on the 21st, March 21st, at our creative workspace on Lenox Avenue, 275 Lenox Avenue. And we would encourage you to go to our website, www.hbany.org, and that's short for Harlem Business Alliance in New York. We would like you to come. We'd like you to hear the position points that we are urging our legislators to implement, to make certain that it's in the regulations, it's in the legislation, that funding is made available from day one, that our communities are protected, that our people are able to and aren't penalized, are able to get into these businesses, and that we are fully supported in creating, growing, and sustaining profitable businesses that employ Black people in our communities.
Great. One final note I want to say, I will be attending an event tomorrow, the Canna East Compliance Seminar, and I understand the governor's representative is going to be there, and there are going to be a few different policy folks. So I will be gathering information. I will be reporting back. If you want,
You're not forgetting me now, right?
I'm not forgetting.
No.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Robinson from the Society of Cannabis Clinicians. This is the ladies' night, and so it's ladies first.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But we have
I
not
wholeheartedly
forgotten
agree
you.
with that.
Yes.
But I am pushing education and clinical education for both medical providers and for patients. And so I'd like to refer everyone to the website of the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, which is an organization of clinical providers that have the longest experience dealing with patients in cannabinoid medicine. And that website is cannabisclinicians.org. And you'll find a lot of clinical information, a lot of the studies, a lot of conditions that cannabis can be used for, which goes above and beyond the list that may be available in the state.
All right. Educate yourselves. A lot of great information on that website.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a wrap, and we're going to get ready for the Harlem Dance Party. So you've been listening to Soul Lounge Primetime,
Every Monday night here on WHCR 90.3 FM.
the voice of Harlem.